If you find yourself on this recap video right now, and you're seeing us for the first time, hi, we're the Pixelists. It's not usually a stuffed animal; it's usually my partner Blake. We recap each episode, and we also discuss each episode. I typically would link the discussion part below for those of you that are just here on the recap. But as I'm missing Blake this week, there will not be a discussion portion. But if you liked this, if you're interested, definitely check out the channel. We have recaps and discussions for every episode, and we will continue to do that. Um, but yeah, let's jump right in. So, last episode ended with the party rolling initiative against this plant monster made up of like twisting vines and roots and has like a bunch of sharp teeth with an underbrush mane, as Matt described it. And so that's right where we pick up. However, it's only about half the party as they were in the middle of a long rest and people, taking guard shifts. So not everyone is awake. So the first thing that happens is Imogen uses her telepathy to shout at Orem and wake him up, and Fern yells at everybody else, essentially. And soon enough, everyone is up and everyone's rolled initiative and combat is going. Now, this combat essentially took up the entirety of the first half of the Critical Role episode, which is a long time. So I'm just going to focus on the big moments in the combat instead of going on every single detail. And those were Ashton, FCG, and Laudna, all at some point in this encounter were eaten by this plant monster and had to force their way out, which all thankfully did successfully get out. But with Laudna in particular, it was a pretty close call. She actually fell unconscious and was making death saves, but due to her special Hollow One ability, Cling to Life, she was able to roll high enough on her death save that she jumped back up to 1 health. So it was super cool, as someone who's not too familiar with the Hollow Ones, to see that functionality come to life. Pun not intended, but let's say pun intended. Another cool thing we saw in this combat was we got an expansion on FCG's mechanics. And what I mean by that is his sympathetic binding that he does with another player to, like, steal their damage and stuff. Because he did it on Imogen, and because he and Imogen had that mind meld moment where they really connected, that bond went to the next level, and mechanically that translated to Imogen getting a D6 inspiration die to roll at her discretion. And I just thought that was really cool. And speaking of Imogen, she used her new Feywild shard that they got in the previous episode to roll on the wild magic table when she twin spell casted catapult at this thing. And the results of that is that her skin turned like a sickly blue color, as Matt described it. And that was the majority of the big things that happened. Of course, Chetney werewolfed out, and everyone had a couple cool moments, but those were the major things. And the how do you want to do this went to FCG with his saw blade, and he basically cleaved this monster and felled it like a tree. However, that wasn't quite the end, as some of its extremities and limbs like continued to kind of twitch and move. So Imogen actually basically used it as kindling and turned this thing's corpse into a big fire. And Chetney also was like still stabbing parts of it, and ultimately they were able to strike its heart, which made it completely fall limp and be like fully dead. After the fight, the party asks Imogen about her new skin tone and just like if she's okay, and she reveals that she feels the same, but not really sure what's going on, and she thinks maybe it's one of these two new rocks that she's collected recently, and hopefully things will go back to normal after a long rest. But if it doesn't, maybe they could try to find help in a nearby town. So then the party, like I said, they were in the middle of a night's rest when this fight started, so they get back to that, complete their long rest without any further interruptions, and wake up the next day to continue their travel to the Heartmoor. Chetney does prod a mushroom at their campsite when they wake up in the morning and get spewed with this like poisonous spore cloud that also like essentially makes him feel drunk, but he's able to shake it off and kind of warns everyone else. Imogen similarly was kind of roaming around the campsite and noticed that there were these ruins in the wilds. And with a history check, Orem actually identifies them as ancient elven architecture, like pre-calamity stuff. And Imogen is fascinated by this, and so she uses Laudna's chisel to carve off a piece of an arc of the ruins to take with her. After they do that, they get on their horses and make their way, and that is where the episode goes to break. But we pick back up traveling, and they're just on the road. They pass another caravan of people going the opposite direction, and Chetney asks, "Any trouble ahead on the road?" And the other driver just says, "Stick to the route, stick to the road," and that's all they say. So we continue traveling, and then we come upon like what is a rest stop essentially on the side of the road. They see another like group of travelers who are currently stopped and just resting and hanging out, doing various things, and they stop to talk to them. There is a female dragonborn who like comes up to speak to them, and Imogen asks, "How far is it to the Heartmoor?" And this female dragonborn, who introduces herself as Hutchin, says they're about 3 hours away. Hutchin, the dragonborn, is the only one speaking to them, but the party notices that with her we have a male Qatari, who I believe is like a cat-like person. Kind of like a tabaxi, but I don't know if they didn't say tabaxi for copyright reasons, or perhaps if this is just similar but not that. Who wields like a bow around their shoulder. We have a human female with a drum, a small male goblin, and a female furbolg. So Imogen introduces herself, and FCG introduces everyone as Bell's Hells, and Hutchin wonders why they have a name. She asks if they're like a band or they performers, and Chetney says they're multi-talented, whatever the job calls for. And while this discussion is happening, FCG tries to detect thoughts on the Qatari, which this component has VSM, like he has to speak, he has to do hand motions, the whole 9 yards. So Hutchin notices him doing that, and basically her eyes narrow, and the party tries to cover for FCG, saying like, "Oh, they like to perform," and nothing comes of it, but it seems like Hutchin definitely like keyed in on the fact that FCG was doing something. Now, in the detect thoughts spell, FCG just gleans that this Qatari is like basically on alert, is very suspicious of these random travelers, and he doesn't probe deeper into their mind in order to find new like deeper thoughts. Fern then asks Hutchin, "Oh, do you guys have any like anything fun for sale, like any trinkets or anything?" And she calls over the furbolg to Hannah, who's wearing a bracelet, and asks her to remove it, and basically offers up, "Yeah, we have this bracelet. It contains these 7 uncut gems, and that basically sell it for 20 gold." Fern doesn't seem to jump on that, so Ashton does. Ashton says they will buy it. And they do. And kind of also while this is happening, Travis asks Matt if he could do kind of like a late insight check on if this group was actually... Oh, I don't think I said this yet. I'm sorry. So this group of hunters, as Hutchin revealed, they are also heading to the Heartmoor. So Chetney asks if he could do an insight check, and if they were really traveling to the Heartmoor, or if maybe that was a lie and they're just saying that so that they can like follow the party. And Matt gets up and gives Travis a whisper, and we are not informed as to what he gleaned there. So the party's Orem actually offers, since you guys are traveling to the Heartmoor, we're traveling to the Heartmoor, why don't we make this a party and go together? He doesn't say it like that, but he offers to travel together. And Hutchin says, "Well, how about not together, but like in tandem? Like we'll be behind you a little ways, but we'll each be close enough to each other that we can help each other if something were to happen." And everyone is cool with that. So everyone gets packed back up, and they make their way to the Heartmoor with Bell's Hells leading the way. And after a bit of travel, they arrive at the gates to the Heartmoor hamlet, where 2 wilder guards await them out front. and they basically ask, what's your business here? And the group has to make a group persuasion check, which they pass, and they're allowed inside. The guards tell them where they can find the stables, a couple places to stay, and send them on their way. So the first stop is the party goes to the stables, kind of checks in the horses, and then they decide, let's go to the inn. So they head to the Sodden Grange Inn, and they rent 4 rooms from the halfling owner there, who has introduced himself as Dobby Kingsman. And the party basically asks him about Istani, about the Hydroga Twilight Mirror, and he kind of fills them in on the city. And while they're talking, he's smoking this pipe the whole time. And Ashton says, what are you smoking there? And Dobby reveals that here in the Heartmoor, a lot of people, himself included, will grow and cultivate and dry their own. I don't know if it's tobacco or not, but their own stuff and smoke it. And Ashton asks if he can have a sample, to which Dobby obliges. And he just says, you know what, you'll have to find your own pipe, but here, you can try some of this. And immediately Chetney starts like whittling Ashton a pipe. But then after, conversing with him a little bit, they decide to get a few drinks here and kind of unwind and discuss their next options after having, the long day of travel. And it basically boils down to there's 2 things they need to accomplish here. They need to go to the Twilight Mirror and, do this whole heist thing. And they need to talk to Istani, who lives here, to find out not only about Imogen's potential connections with her mother, but also the attack on the Loomis twins and how that ties to what Orem is going through. So they decide to head to the Twilight Mirror first and are able to find it very easily as it sticks out like a sore thumb. So they make their way up to the door, ring the bell, no answer. You kind of see somebody peering through the curtains, ring the bell a few more times, and finally the doors pop open and they can see that there's 2 guards like still putting on armor as the door gets opened, and a male half-elf greets them, dressed to the nines, and asks if they would like, a day pass, a half-day pass, or the full tour. And Ashton says, actually, we're here on behalf of Gianna Hexam. We're here to speak to Mr. Hydroga and about this gambit. And Avon Hydroga is delighted. And he's like, okay, well, you can't take the tour then, because that would ruin the heist thing that's coming. He doesn't want anything to be revealed. He wants all preparations to be made in mystery. And details and everything are going to be revealed the following night at midnight. And FCG asks if the other, or I don't know if FCG asks, but he's asked if the other group has come through and if they've gone through the tour. And Avon says no, like they haven't, they're not here yet. And FCG rolls an insight and again gets a Matt whisper. However, we're not told of anything he learned. So the party basically they've checked in and they know that nothing is going down until tomorrow night at midnight. So now that they made their introduction, they leave and they make their way to Mosslight Manor, which is where they've been told they can find Istani. So Orem walks up to the door, gives a quick knock. An old Uriah man, which is half elf, half orc, opens the door, asks how he can help them. Orem reveals that they are here at the behest of Oshad Breggio, and if he is Istani, and Istani says yes, and immediately invites them in as friends, since they are here on the behest of Breggio, and begins to make them tea. And as they come in, they notice that this room is warm, but it's very cluttered, not quite hoarder-like, but getting there. And as they settle in to have these conversations, that is actually where the episode ends. And that was episode 18 of Critical Role.